Chapter 1 Cafeteria. At the cafeteria of the Galactic station was a sprawling expanse of polished metal and gleaming glass. The hum of conversation buzzed through the space like an insect swarm, punctuated by the clinking of utensils against plates. Long rows of tables stretched out before Marcus Williams as he navigated his way in with a group of chattering children from Earthside Elementary. "Daddy," whispered Jenna, pulling on his sleeve. "Where are we supposed to sit?" Marcus scanned the room and spotted an empty table near one corner. He gently steered Jenna towards it, while keeping an eye out for any signs that their small crew might need help finding seats elsewhere. The air smelled of freshly brewed tea and exotic spices, making his mouth water despite having eaten a hearty meal back on Earth. As Marcus took a seat beside the window to monitor his charges better, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut since arriving at this station for their school's cultural exchange program. He was no stranger to hard work and long hours, but there was something different about being Hera, something unsettling. "Mr. Williams," one child called out hesitantly from across the table. "Why do they all look so scared?" Marcus followed the direction of his gaze towards a small cluster of alien children huddled near a counter on the other side of the room, each holding trays filled with food, but not eating any. He noticed that even though those smaller aliens were clearly part of the cafeteria, the staff busily cleaning tables and setting down used they weren't allowed to eat. A large, furry girl, about 10 years old, if Earth standards could be applied here, stood nearby as one particularly burly alien pushed her away from a food cart. "It's not right," Jenna said softly beside him. Her voice broke through Marcus's thoughts like a sharp knife slicing butter. He looked down at his daughter and then back to the scene by the counter. The larger aliens around Kira were dismissive, some even mocking as she tried futilely to get their attention for another attempt at food. It was clear they didn't want her there anywhere near them, and it made Marcus's blood boil. "Tell me about this place," Jenna pressed him gently. "Why don't these kids eat?" Marcus' grip on his fork tightened, and he could feel the tension in every muscle of his body as he watched Kira struggle against a larger alien who was shoving her aside with one arm. She wavered slightly but remained resolute. "Some people are just cruel," Marcus replied slowly, trying to choose words that wouldn't terrify Jenna while still making sense to an 11-year-old girl. "I think they don't want others around them if it makes them feel bad about themselves." Jenna's eyes widened at the sight before her. She had seen bullying back home, but never something quite like this. "Daddy," she began again, tugging on his sleeve once more insistently than before. "That girl is hungry." Marcus followed Jenna's gaze and felt a wave of anger wash over him as he saw Kira's face pale with hunger despite her efforts to hide it behind the facade of stoicism. The other children around them watched in silence, but shifted uneasily, uncomfortable witnesses. "Hey kid," Marcus called out loudly enough for others nearby to hear too. "You hungry?" Kira's head snapped up at his voice. She looked towards him through a haze of fear and uncertainty before glancing back at the larger aliens who had been tormenting her earlier. "What are you doing?" one of them barked angrily, turning their attention in Marcus' direction for just long enough to see Kira hesitate, but then start walking toward where he stood with Jenna. "Burly," alien sneered and turned back towards his meal. "Sir," another adult at the table objected quietly when he saw that Marcus was getting up from his seat. "We shouldn't intervene." Marcus ignored them, already making his way across the room to join Kira as she approached him hesitantly. His daughter followed closely behind, her eyes wide with awe and fear. "Can I talk with this girl?" asked a female alien nearby indignantly, raising an eyebrow at Marcus audacity in addressing such low-class beings directly. Her companions echoed similar sentiments, but didn't step forward to challenge what he was doing themselves. They remained where they were, watching curiously. Instead, "I don't need permission," replied Marcus firmly, as Kira reached him and stood just a few feet away, still wary of the larger aliens who had harassed her earlier and now watched with thinly veiled disdain. "My kids are hungry when they're hungry." Kira's eyes darted back towards those watching them, but then returned to meet his gaze tentatively. "Thank you," she murmured softly, almost too quietly for anyone else present to hear over the buzz of conversation around them in the cafeteria. Marcus didn't miss her words and nodded reassuringly. "Come on." He turned slightly so that Jenna could see Kira clearly as he extended a hand towards her and held out his own lunch tray, which was still mostly full, since Earth food often left him unsatisfied here compared to what aliens preferred eating during these exchanges. The gesture didn't escape the notice of those nearby either. There were gasps and mutters among them, but none dared step in between Marcus, Jenna, and Kira as they moved away together towards a quieter corner near an exit. Every eye on every alien present followed their movement like ripples spreading outward from where a stone had dropped into water. Some frowned disapprovingly, while others exchanged murmurs of surprise or confusion among themselves about what was happening here. Tadiwan, one human father, refused to stand idly by and instead chose action, even when it meant defying the established norms within this galactic society. The cafeteria, his buzz continued undiminished around them, but for those three individuals moving across its polished floors together now held an entirely different kind of silence, a quiet understanding born not just out of shared adversity, but also mutual recognition that sometimes standing up against injustice is worth far more than following blindly what others dictate. Chapter 2 Administrator's Office. Mr. Williams, Administrator Vextoth called out sharply from across his sleekly polished desk as Marcus stepped into his office, causing the alien to straighten and pause mid-step. Vextoth's expression was a mix of irritation and thinly veiled disapproval, his large, insectoid eyes narrowing slightly under thick antennae that twitched with displeasure. He gestured toward one of the few sturdy chairs stationed around the room for visitors, but Marcus didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he remained standing by the door. "Sir," a burly security guard who had escorted him inside muttered softly to Vextoth before stepping out and closing the door behind them with an almost imperceptible click. The atmosphere within the office instantly grew heavier as silence fell between Marcus and the administrator. "You disrupted station order today, Mr. Williams," Vextoth began in a tone that suggested he was more than slightly displeased. His words carried a definite edge of warning. "I've spoken to your daughter's teacher," she explained, "how you fed food from your tray to an alien child who is considered servant class here on the station." Marcus crossed his arms over his broad chest, looking Vextoth squarely in the eyes without blinking or flinching back at the alien's imposing presence. "A kid was hungry," he stated simply and firmly. Vextoth's antennae jerked forward, as if surprised by Marcus' straightforwardness. The administrator cleared his throat audibly before continuing. "Mr. Williams, you must understand that on this station and in many other parts of the galaxy there are strict social hierarchies. Kafari like Kira fall into a lower class designated for servants and laborers." He paused as if to let Marcus process this information, but continued when it was clear Marcus wasn't going to respond otherwise. "On Earth, we call that slavery," Marcus interjected bluntly, his voice steady despite the growing tension in Vextoth's demeanor. The administrator seemed taken aback by Marcus's directness and bluntness regarding such a sensitive topic. He glanced away momentarily before fixing his gaze back on Marcus with renewed focus. "Mr. Williams, I don't care about your rules," Marcus interrupted again, cutting through any protest Vextoth might have tried to launch at that point. "Kids shouldn't go hungry because of their birth." He met the alien's eyes squarely once more and saw a spark of something, a flicker of realization mixed with irritation flit across them. "Your actions today," Vextoth pressed through gritted teeth, trying again, despite Marcus's interruptions, "have caused an international incident. Your school group is now in jeopardy because you decided to defy regulations." A woman stepped into the room behind him. She was his daughter's teacher and looked visibly uncomfortable as her eyes darted between Marcus and Vextoth. She cleared her throat gently before speaking up. "Mr. Williams, I need you." Marcus turned briefly toward her, but didn't soften his stance or tone at all. "If standing up for a hungry kid causes an incident," he said firmly without looking away from Administrator Vextoth again, who seemed momentarily stunned by the audacity of Marcus' retort and refusal to back down despite being outnumbered both in numbers and authority. The teacher stepped quietly out of their way, as if sensing that now was not the time for intervention. "Try it," Marcus concluded, his words carrying a weighty finality that made Vextoth's antennae twitch even more noticeably now. Clearly, he wasn't used to such straightforward resistance from humans, and especially not someone like Marcus Williams, who didn't seem overly impressed by galactic bureaucracy or diplomatic niceties when faced with what he perceived as injustice. The office was silent once more after those words. Suddenly, the faint hum of technology and soft murmurings beyond its walls broke through. A long, tense moment passed before Vextoth responded. "You will regret this," he said slowly but deliberately, now that Marcus had forced him to acknowledge his defiance openly. "You have endangered your group's visit here and may face further consequences." Marcus didn't back down or even blink at the threat. Instead, there was a quiet resolve in how he stood there before Vextoth's desk, ready for whatever came next, without backing away from what felt right to him. "Try it," Marcus repeated calmly one last time, meeting Vextoth's gaze unflinchingly, until finally being dismissed with another nod toward the door. Chapter 3, Station Plaza. The commotion had started even before Marcus left Vextoth's office. Whispers and murmurs followed him as he made his way through the bustling corridors of the Galactic Station towards the central plaza. The air was thick with an undercurrent of tension, and everyone seemed to be watching his every move. Some humans from his group had already begun talking nervously amongst themselves, their faces pale with worry. "Mr. Williams," a young woman called out as he passed by her in one of the corridors on the way back to the cafeteria. She was holding hands with two other students who looked about Kira's age. "Did they get mad at you?" Marcus paused for just a moment, glancing down at them before continuing his walk towards the plaza, where it would be easier to talk freely without prying ears nearby. "They have their own rules," he said tersely, which wasn't exactly reassuring but was as much comfort as he could offer in that moment. He knew there were likely more questions coming from the kids when they gathered back at their quarters, and he needed some time alone first before addressing them en masse again. By now, news of what happened with Kira had spread across parts of the station like wildfire. Marcus sensed a growing unease among many humans, as well as other species, who were starting to view him not just as someone causing trouble, but also as an oddity, a human stepping out from behind galactic politics and bureaucracy, for principles. The central plaza, where he was heading, bustled with life and activity. Colorful displays of alien flora and fauna adorned the walkways leading towards the main cafeteria area. Different species milled around, engaged in various forms of commerce or simply socializing under brightly lit canopies that provided partial shade from the harsh light above. Just a regular guy, one human man, was overheard saying loudly to his companions as they walked past Marcus near an information kiosk displaying holographic maps and alerts. "He's just trying to do what he thinks is right, isn't it?" The humans around him nodded grimly in agreement, their eyes following his progress with a mixture of respect and worry. As the plaza opened up into its main hub area surrounding the cafeteria, the entrance, Marcus could see various species moving about, some engaged in heated discussions or disputes that were likely sparked by his actions earlier. The air was filled not only with sounds of alien languages, but also human voices expressing shock and disbelief at how quickly tensions had escalated. "Hey," a voice said from behind him as he walked towards the cafeteria entrance, breaking through the surrounding murmurings like an alarm bell cutting through static noise on radio waves. He turned to see another construction worker by trade, another big man with thick arms and broad shoulders. He held out his hand in greeting, but stopped short of offering anything too familiar given their current circumstances. "And Paul." "Marcus," he responded, shaking the offered hand firmly, even though there was a mutual understanding that neither would be sticking around long enough to call each other friends. Paul's eyes flickered towards where Marcus had come from, and then back again before finally meeting his gaze squarely. He nodded once in acknowledgement of what happened earlier with Kerr, knowing full well why Marcus looked like he'd just taken on the entire station single-handedly. Said, "Some folks are saying you caused trouble." Marcus grunted, but didn't say anything. It was clear from Paul's expression that he knew more than most about dealing with situations where things weren't fair. He wasn't judging. "I don't think it's a big deal," Marcus finally replied after several seconds of uncomfortable silence between them, breaking their eye contact to focus on the crowd gathering around him now that everyone had heard his name associated with whatever mess was unfolding. Paul nodded again and stepped back slightly but didn't turn away. He watched as more humans began approaching, some asking questions about what happened, while others simply stood there silently, as if waiting for some kind of resolution or confirmation from Marcus himself. "Mr. Williams," another voice called out, this time a woman holding two children who looked to be around 9 years old and 7 years old respectively, their faces pale with worry. "What's going on?" Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with the youngest child. Her eyes were wide with fear and uncertainty. Placed his hand gently over her shoulder. "It's okay," Marcus assured her softly but firmly. Then, turning slightly towards the cafeteria entrance again where Kira had been denied food earlier that day, he added loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm not done yet." The commotion in the plaza increased as news of what happened continued to spread. Groups started forming around various points, while others wandered aimlessly looking lost and concerned. The atmosphere felt charged with anticipation, a mix of fear about potential repercussions from higher authorities combined with admiration for someone willing to speak up against unjust rules. Inside, Kira was sitting quietly in a corner by one of the cafeteria, his food bins away from prying eyes, her small body curled into itself as if trying to hide completely. Her green scales shimmered faintly under fluorescent lights, and tears glistened on her cheeks despite efforts at holding them back. She hadn't eaten since morning due to fear over breaking rules. "Kira?" a soft voice asked, catching both Kira's attention and sending a shiver down her spine, mix of hope and dread. She looked up slowly from where she sat with wide eyes full of confusion and uncertainty before seeing Marcus standing there, looking stern but kind all at once. His presence was comforting in ways she couldn't explain. Kira's heart sank further when he knelt beside her on the floor next to one of those same bins marked "not for consumption," the very rule that had caused so much trouble today. She wiped away fresh tears and whispered, voice trembling slightly, "I'm sorry." He reached out gently toward her shoulder, but paused mid-reach, as if remembering something before pulling back instead. "You didn't do anything wrong," Marcus said firmly, looking right into Kira's eyes with a steadiness that made her feel protected in ways she couldn't remember ever feeling. He saw the fear and doubt lingering there even now, despite his words attempting to reassure otherwise. It was clear this wasn't just about breaking rules anymore. It had become personal. "You can eat," Marcus told her, reaching into one of those bins as if daring anyone watching from afar or nearby to challenge him. And indeed, a few passers-by paused at the sight, but chose not to intervene despite obvious tension building up around them. Kira watched in amazement and disbelief. Nobody ever dared defy regulations like this before. "It doesn't matter," Kira whispered back after swallowing hard against tears threatening again, once more from both relief over finally getting something to eat, as well sadness realizing just how alone she felt even now among people who should understand better than anyone else. "Rules are rules." Marcus frowned, his expression softening, but also growing resolute. He looked at her with an intensity that made Kira feel seen really and truly for the first time perhaps since arriving here. "Bad rules deserve to be broken," Marcus said quietly yet firmly, enough so only she could hear him over other noises around them. It wasn't just about standing up against unfairness anymore, though it started there now. He seemed determined to push further towards change beyond immediate consequences or dangers involved. The moment was raw and full of unspoken promises. Marcus knew what needed to happen next, yet also understood how difficult it would be despite best intentions. Kira nodded once slowly, but didn't say anything more as Marcus straightened up from where they had been speaking so intimately. Her gaze followed him silently, even after he started walking away towards other areas outside cafeteria. The premises. "Mr. Williams," a young girl called out again, stopping just briefly before continuing on to another part of plaza area with classmates trailing closely behind. She was the same one who asked earlier, but looked less worried now, seeing Marcus move past them without any immediate signs of being stopped or detained further by station personnel. "I promise to do something," Marcus said aloud as he continued walking away from Kira's direction, but still within earshot of anyone lingering around. Those few passers-by exchanged glances amongst themselves, some shaking heads disapprovingly, while others looked thoughtful and intrigued despite the potential risks involved in supporting such actions directly now or later. Kira watched him go with a mix of hope tinged by doubt. She had seen adults break promises before to avoid trouble. She didn't believe they would follow through again this time. It was just another disappointment waiting around corner. He continued on his way, feeling the weight of unresolved tension and uncertainty behind every step, despite initial resolve shown in those few quiet moments with Kira alone by food bin earlier that day inside cafeteria area. Marcus knew what he needed to do next. Be someone willing or able enough to listen beyond station authorities who would only reinforce force existing systems rather than challenge them. His thoughts were interrupted briefly as a group of kids approached him once more, some asking questions while others just looked relieved seeing their chaperone walking freely again, without immediate repercussions despite earlier confrontation with Administrator Vextoth and subsequent spread of news affecting entire plaza. Now, "We're hungry," one child mentioned quietly, after several minutes spent answering various queries from classmates. Marcus nodded solemnly, but didn't hesitate before taking out small snacks he had managed to sneak back into quarters upon leaving cafeteria area earlier that day. Items meant for emergency situations rather than casual snacking given station rules restricting food imports due to varied dietary needs across different species. He handed these snacks around among his group without comment, watching as faces relax slightly from worry and hunger pangs easing up temporarily. The act felt small yet meaningful, a reminder perhaps of why he stood up against unjust regulations earlier, even if immediate solutions weren't fully in sight just yet. As evening approached and activities shifted towards preparing for next day's events, whatever they might entail, Marcus found himself lingering near cafeteria area once more, joined by a few adults from his group who had similar concerns regarding treatment of Kira, among others like her, despite no clear plan forward beyond showing solidarity through actions already taken thus far. "We need to talk," one woman said softly, placing hand lightly on Marcus' arm. It was the same teacher mentioned earlier, but now spoke more as concerned peer rather than merely authority figure. "About what happens next?" Marcus nodded silently, in agreement aware that steps needed going forward couldn't be done alone, even if initial confrontation appeared so initially. The plaza remained busy throughout evening hours, with various species coming together to exchange goods or simply relax after a day's activities. Marcus and his group found themselves observing quietly from afar rather than joining immediate fray, given lingering tension around recent events still hanging heavy in atmosphere. They exchanged hushed words occasionally about possible next moves, but also recognizing limitations faced by outsiders when trying to change long-standing systems deeply ingrained within galactic society. "Try it," a voice echoed softly in Marcus' mind, echoing finality of his earlier confrontation with Administrator Vextoth. Despite potential dangers involved now, he knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but seeing hope flicker briefly amidst despair felt worth fighting for anyway. Maybe small acts could lead to bigger changes over time. And he promises to do something. She doesn't believe him. Adults never help. Marcus approached one of the station workers near the cafeteria area where they had last seen Kira earlier that day. The worker looked up as he drew closer and eyed him curiously. "Excuse me," Marcus said firmly but politely, placing a hand on his work belt to emphasize who was asking for directions, in case it wasn't clear from the way he towered over most others here with his broad shoulders and sturdy build. "I'm looking for Kurish's Sci-Fi." The worker nodded hesitantly before pointing towards an exit door slightly further away behind, which lay a complex network of tunnels leading into less traveled areas of the station where Marcus suspected housing units might exist, especially if they were meant to avoid drawing attention. "Thanks," Marcus replied shortly and turned on his heel, striding purposefully forward. A few more questioning glances followed him, but none attempted to stop as he made his way towards designated exit without further delays or complications. The hallway beyond was dimly lit by flickering lights mounted high up against the walls. It stretched out endlessly before him into darkened recesses where shadows seemed almost alive with whispers of unseen presences lurking within. The air grew colder here, carrying faint metallic tang, an underlying musty scent that suggested these passages had seen little use recently. After several minutes walking along this path, guided by occasional glimmers from distant lights indicating turnings ahead or intersections further down corridor networks winding confusingly around each other in a maze-like structure designed to deter uninvited visitors rather than welcome them warmly, Marcus finally came across another worker standing guard outside what appeared to be entrance of more substantial building carved directly out of solid rock. "Can I help you?" the guard asked, with wary eyes scanning over him up and down once again before returning focus back onto face level, where he saw determination written clearly upon it despite rough exterior of man in front, suggesting perhaps background less accustomed to navigating alien stations than some others might have been used to by now after spending years adapting themselves. Marcus offered a friendly smile in return, though knowing that such gesture alone wouldn't be enough here. "I'm looking for Kira's home," he explained, carefully choosing words thoughtfully, but without hesitation. The Tivari girl had become his responsibility after what happened earlier today, and seeing how she was treated, no matter the reasons or justifications given by others, felt obliged to follow through on initial promise made regardless of risks involved. The guard considered for a moment longer before nodding curtly, turning aside slightly and gesturing towards set of doors beyond which led into main living quarters reserved specifically for furry population. Based upon previous observations Marcus had managed to gather while accompanying group from Earth. "Go ahead," he said grudgingly, nonetheless granting access after ensuring visitor wouldn't attempt anything untoward while passing through restricted area. Stepping inside, the space opened up considerably, with cavernous ceilings towering overhead supported by sturdy pillars carved out of rock itself and running down center lengthwise, separating living quarters into two symmetrical halves on either side. Sparse furnishings lined walls here, along narrow walkways between them leading further back, where dim light barely managed to pierce darkness stretching endlessly far ahead, suggesting this place had never been designed with comfort or aesthetics in mind so much as practicality dictated by necessity. "Hello," Marcus called out tentatively, voice echoing softly off rough stone surfaces around him, though no immediate responses came forth from within shadowy depths further along corridors extending away left and right. Then footsteps approached slowly but steadily towards front entrance area, where he currently stood waiting impatiently for answers to questions troubling his mind. A figure emerged finally into brighter light, pooling near door threshold, revealing itself as middle-aged woman with familiar features matching Kira's more closely now visible under scrutiny, her eyes widening slightly upon recognizing visitor standing there. Despite initial hesitation, she had shown back outside when deciding whether or not grant access. "Mr. Williams," the Vari mother greeted formally, but warmly nonetheless, reaching out tentatively towards man in front before pausing mid-motion, seeing how uncomfortable such gesture might make human visitor given cultural differences involved here between two species used to different customs and traditions governing personal interactions, alike back on home worlds separated by vast interstellar distances across countless light years. "Mom," Marcus responded with respectful nod of head acknowledging familiar courtesy, extended his way even if didn't feel entirely at ease reciprocating similar treatment under circumstances like these. I just wanted to check on Kura, make sure she was okay after what happened earlier. The fairy woman smiled gently, her eyes softening. "'Tis fine now," she said in a voice that betrayed the stress of recent events and the daily struggle they faced here on this station. "Thank you for standing up for her. I know it wasn't easy." She paused before adding with genuine gratitude, "We are grateful." Marcus shook his head solemnly. "It was the right thing to do," he said firmly, without further elaboration needed, having come too far already and seen enough injustice first, and to understand now that taking sides against prevailing order often meant facing consequences, but such sacrifice felt necessary sometimes for making real changes happen eventually. Seeing how serious his expression remained even after receiving thanks, the furry woman seemed to sense there was still more Marcus wanted from her. "Is something else troubling you?" she asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on visitor's arm despite visible hesitation about doing so given unfamiliarity of gesture and potential for misunderstanding arising out such simple physical contact when crossing cultural boundaries. "Just trying to understand," Marcus admitted honestly, after few seconds' reflection over words he should choose carefully next. "Why things are this way here. Kira works in cafeteria, yeah, but can't eat there herself." A flicker of sadness crossed the furry woman's face as she looked away momentarily before turning back with renewed resolve evident now behind her eyes, meeting Marcus' gaze squarely once more without flinching under unyielding scrutiny directed towards her. "Because we are considered servant class," she explained simply yet clearly enough so there could be no misunderstanding about implications involved in assigning such classification label given to each furry population here compared against rest of galactic society at large. "Is that fair?" Marcus asked quietly but firmly, unable to suppress feeling growing inside him even now seeing tangible proof before eyes. Just how deeply rooted systemic inequalities ran within this place and possibly beyond it, extending out into wider galaxy. If Kira's mother's comments were accurate about status quo prevailing here dictating fate for entire species rather than individuals alone. The furry woman sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping slightly under weight of burden she had clearly been carrying for a long time now without ever feeling truly able to break free from oppressive chains binding them all down. "Not fair," she agreed sadly, shaking head once in confirmation, though adding nothing further along those lines, because didn't need explaining any more. Suffice it to say how deeply felt this inequality ran throughout everyday lives lived by people like Kira and her mother here. "Is there anything I can do?" Marcus pressed on, unwilling yet again to simply turn away empty-handed from situation presented before him now, even if knew realistically what small steps alone might achieve against entrenched systemic issues plaguing station, but still believed strongly enough in power of persistence alongside collective effort coming together could help bring about meaningful change eventually. "Maybe the furry woman said hesitantly after careful consideration, meeting Marcus' eyes once more with renewed hope burning brightly now behind them despite initial reluctance shown earlier when he first approached her home seeking information and assistance rather than simply leaving without further inquiries made afterwards. "Documenting what you see here, sharing it back on Earth, could help raise awareness." Marcus nodded slowly in agreement, already reaching into pockets to retrieve small camera device stowed there securely just for such purpose, as had occurred earlier today during confrontation with Administrator Vextoth, and subsequent spread of news affecting entire plaza area. Now he activated recording function immediately upon receiving permission from Th. Fari woman standing beside him without delay or hesitation, because understood importance timing played here in securing evidence before station authorities moved to censor any unwanted details about harsh realities facing minority population living under their watchful eyes. "Thank you," Marcus said sincerely, once more reaching out tentatively, this time around placing hand lightly upon shoulder of Th. Furry mother, showing respect and gratitude felt towards her for allowing him gain access into private quarters reserved specifically for residents here, despite obvious discomfort arising from such gesture between species used differently, familiar customs governing personal interactions alike. "I promise we won't stay quiet about this." The furry woman smiled faintly, shaking head with evident disbelief, but also deep-seated hope burning brightly within her eyes. Now at least someone was willing to listen and act upon information presented before them, rather than simply dismissing it away as irrelevant or unimportant in larger scheme of things facing galactic society today. "Adults never help," she said softly, almost to herself more than addressing Marcus directly, yet still audible enough for him catch what words were spoken, despite initial surprise showing clearly on his face hearing such cynical sentiment expressed so openly amidst otherwise hopeful atmosphere surrounding conversation taking place now. Marcus sighed heavily, squeezing shoulder of Th. Fari woman gently once before stepping back and retrieving camera device from pocket to begin documenting living conditions seen around here in more detail. Dim lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows across rough stone surfaces lining walls as he started moving further down corridors, exploring deeper into heart of station, where minority population lived under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network tunnels connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. As recording function activated, Marcus began to narrate aloud, describing surroundings seen around him in vivid detail. Cavernous ceilings towering overhead, supported by sturdy pillars carved directly from rock itself, and running down center lengthwise, separating living quarters into symmetrical halves on either side. Sparse furnishings lining walls here, along narrow walkways between them leading further back, where dim light barely managed to pierce. Darkness stretching endlessly far ahead, suggesting this place had never been designed with comfort or aesthetics in mind so much as practicality, dictated by necessity, under which circumstances governed day-to-day lives, lived out amidst harsh conditions prevailing within station. "Cold," Marcus noted aloud as chill air swept across him from deeper recesses beyond, carrying faint metallic tang, an underlying musty scent that suggested these passages had seen little use recently. He shivered involuntarily, despite his sturdy work clothing designed to protect against rough handling on construction sites back home, but proving less effective here when facing sub-zero temperatures reigning throughout living quarters reserved specifically for Th. Fari population. "I see you," a voice echoed softly in Marcus's mind, echoing finality of earlier confrontation with Administrator Vextoth, despite potential dangers involved now. As he continued moving further down corridors, exploring deeper into heart of station, where minority population lived under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network tunnels connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. "Try it," the voice said, urging him forward against growing sense unease and trepidation building up within chest as he pressed onward despite knowing full well what risks awaited further down path taken now towards uncovering deeper truths hiding beneath surface here on Galactic Station, where systemic inequalities ran deep amidst everyday lives lived out amongst harsh conditions prevailing throughout complex network tunnels connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. Marcus continued filming and documenting everything he saw, capturing the cramped quarters, cold walls, and the hunched figures of Tefari families struggling to survive. He met several more individuals along his journey who shared stories of hardship and injustice faced daily, but maintained hopeful spirits amidst adversity they encountered day after day, without ever giving up hope that brighter future lay ahead, one way or another, as long someone was willing to listen and act upon information presented before them, rather than simply dismissing it away as irrelevant or unimportant in larger scheme of things facing galactic society today. Finally, with camera still rolling, capturing everything seen around him amidst dimly lit tunnels stretching endlessly far into darkness beyond, where even faintest glimmers failed to penetrate, fully revealing horrors hidden within depths lurking beneath surface here on Galactic Station, governed by harsh realities imposed upon minority population struggling daily just survive under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. Marcus took several deep breaths before reaching back into pockets, once more retrieving smartphone device stashed there securely despite potential risks involved in using such technology openly here on Galactic Station, governed by harsh realities imposed upon minority population struggling daily just survive under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. He contacted human media outlets back home, sending them photographs and recordings documenting conditions faced by Tefari people living within station. His voice trembled slightly as he narrated aloud, describing horrific realities hidden beneath surface here amidst dimly lit tunnels stretching endlessly far into darkness, where even faintest glimmers failed to penetrate, fully revealing horrors lurking within depths. "This story isn't staying quiet," Marcus promised solemnly through screen of smartphone device connecting him back home despite potential risks involved in using such technology openly here on Galactic Station, governed by harsh realities imposed upon minority population struggling daily just survive under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network connecting different parts together like sprawling webs spun out across vast expanse, stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. He hung up after final words spoken aloud through screen, turning back towards Tefari woman standing silently beside him, now watching as actions taken moved them closer, achieving goals shared here amidst dimly lit tunnels stretching endlessly far into darkness, where even faintest glimmers failed to penetrate, fully revealing horrors lurking within depths She nodded once in silent agreement before stepping forward, reaching out tentatively towards man in front, showing respect and gratitude felt towards her for allowing him gain access into private quarters reserved specifically for residents here, despite obvious discomfort arising from such gesture between species used differently, familiar customs governing personal interactions alike. "Thank you, Tish," furry woman said softly, almost to herself more than addressing Marcus directly, yet still audible enough for him catch what words were spoken despite initial surprise showing clearly on his face hearing such cynical sentiment expressed so openly amidst otherwise hopeful atmosphere surrounding conversation taking place now amidst dimly lit tunnels stretching endlessly far into darkness, where even faintest glimmers failed to penetrate, fully revealing horrors lurking within depths. "Adults never help," she said softly once more, almost to herself, as Marcus stepped back, allowing her passage through narrow doorway leading deeper still down corridors, exploring heart of station governed by harsh realities imposed upon minority population struggling daily just survive under watchful eyes of authorities overseeing operations throughout complex network connecting different parts together like sprawling web spun out across vast expanse stretching endlessly far ahead into darkened recesses beyond. And he contacts human media. This story isn't staying quiet. The grand auditorium of the Galactic Station hummed with anticipation as beings from various planets took their seats under a glittering array of holographic lights that cast an ethereal glow over everything. The air was thick with tension and whispered conversations, carrying hints of spice and synthetic perfumes unique to each species represented in this vast assembly room. Vextoth, the self-appointed overseer of the station's elite class, stood at the podium, his scales gleaming under the lights like polished chrome as he surveyed the crowd. His voice cut through the murmuring when he began speaking with a condescending tone that made Marcus's fists clench involuntarily. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vextoth started in a commanding baritone, "we are gathered here today to address an incident of unprecedented nature, a human interfering where they do not belong. This man dared to film the private quarters of our workers and sent it back home." His eyes darted around the room, seeking out Marcus, who was seated nearby with stern resolve. Marcus felt a cold sweat break across his forehead as he stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the auditorium focus on him. He took a deep breath before addressing Vextoth directly without raising his voice, letting gravity do its work instead of shouting over the buzz now circulating around them all. "Vextoth," Marcus began calmly but firmly, "you want to talk about interference? Let's talk about children working without food and families in poverty while serving the wealthy." His hands were steady as he took out his smartphone from inside his jacket pocket, holding it up for everyone to see before pressing play. The footage started playing on a screen above Vextoth's head, a silent testament of what life was really like here. The images showed Kira and other furry children working in the dimly lit corridors, tired but resilient faces reflecting off dull metal walls that gleamed faintly under weak fluorescent lighting. Voices from recordings played over speakers echoed through auditorium. "The food ration we get is enough for 2 days." A young voice like Kira said softly yet clear amidst crackle of recording. Vextoth paled slightly at the sight and sound, his posture stiffening as he tried to regain control of proceedings, but failed in presence overwhelming reality, exposed now starkly before everyone's eyes. "How dare you?" Vextoth spluttered, finally losing composure completely for first time since taking charge here on station, where order had always been priority number one over all else. "I'm not the only one who knows what's happening," Marcus continued with unyielding calm, despite knowing full well risks involved in standing up against authority so openly and directly. "Kira isn't alone either. Her story is just beginning to be heard, but she's far from being first child ever forced into labor under oppressive conditions here." Suddenly, there was a collective intake of breath throughout Assembly Hall as recording played out, further revealing truths about life endured within walls of station that many had chosen conveniently ignore until now. Furry workers sitting near back watched silently with wide-eyed shock, disbelief etched clearly onto their faces. Marcus continued, his voice steady and clear. "You want to know who the real interferences are? It's those in power here who deny basic rights for no reason other than class discrimination." Vextoth opened mouth again, but before he could say another word, Marcus held up hand, silencing him momentarily. "I am not done," Marcus said firmly. Marcus pressed on, addressing the entire assembly with a measured voice. "If you want to know what this place is really like, look no further than here among us. Taught a look into eyes of workers who put their lives at risk every day just trying make ends meet while serving others. That's real interference, and I won't stand idly by." His words resonated deeply within hearts present, even reaching back home via media feeds now transmitting images live to human news outlets eager for coverage. Such bold actions taking place amidst alien environment light years away from Earth. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the hum of conversations muted as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Vextoth's eyes flashed with anger, but also uncertainty. He knew that if he moved against Marcus now, it would only escalate matters and draw unwanted attention to the station's practices. "You are trying to make trouble," Vextoth spat through gritted teeth instead, unable yet unwilling to back down completely despite evident shift already underway in atmosphere around him within hall full of beings from different worlds brought together under single roof, but divided by societal norms dictating hierarchy and power dynamics since time immemorial. Marcus took another deep breath before answering calmly, "Maybe so. But isn't it better if trouble wakes up those who've been sleeping than let injustices continue unchecked? What kind of society are we building when children go hungry while others feast?" Vextoth's face darkened further, his intentions clear as he turned to order guards present to arrest Marcus on spot, but stopped short upon seeing human reporters and camera crews suddenly appearing from corners previously unnoticed, now stepping forward ready to document proceedings closely. "Hold it," one reporter shouted out loudly, capturing everyone's attention again. "You can't just take him away without due process." Vextoth hesitated, his eyes darting nervously between the crowd, Marcus himself, and the human media team that had materialized seemingly from nowhere to bear witness. "Think carefully about your actions," another reporter added with a stern look. "This is becoming international news." With this unexpected turn of events unfolding quickly before them all amidst tense atmosphere swirling thickly now throughout Grand Assembly Hall, Vextoth found himself backed into corner where no exit seemed available anymore, leaving him little choice but to step back. He glared at Marcus one last time before turning away, abruptly dismissing guards standing ready beside him. "We will continue this discussion later," he muttered through clenched teeth, as if trying to convince both himself and rest of audience otherwise, then stormed out swiftly, exiting stage left amidst flurry activity stirred up by sudden turn events had taken so unexpectedly. The room remained silent for a moment longer before applause erupted from several sections. Humans clapped warmly while some furry workers nodded in quiet appreciation despite cultural differences preventing them openly showing such emotions here publicly. Marcus allowed himself small smile seeing impact of actions he took thus far proving effective already, even before full extent realized yet to be seen. As people started dispersing, Kira approached him cautiously with a look of gratitude mixed with awe on her scaled face. "Thank you," she said softly, but clearly, amidst hum now filling auditorium again as beings began moving around exchanging views and discussing what had just occurred. Marcus ruffled her head gently despite being careful not to touch too roughly due to sensitivity inherent in furry physiology. "It's about time someone spoke up for fairness here," he replied quietly, looking down at Kira with soft expression reflecting deep concern beyond immediate actions taken now coming into effect immediately yet still having long-term implications yet unknown. Kira looked up at him with wide eyes full of hope and gratitude. "Will things really change?" Marcus nodded firmly despite uncertainty lingering within heart about exact outcomes resulting from what transpired here this day under stars shining brightly above galaxy far beyond walls separating them now physically but perhaps spiritually closer after shared moment breaking silence on issue plaguing station for so long. "Only one way to find out," Marcus said with resolve, "and I'm going to be right there when it happens." And Devextoth tries to have Marcus arrested. "Human media is watching." He backs down. Marcus stood amidst the hushed crowd as they slowly dispersed from the grand assembly hall on the galactic station. The air was thick with a mixture of relief and tension. It smelled faintly metallic due to the numerous machines that kept the space habitat functional. Soft murmurs and conversations filled the room, along with the occasional soft hum of the ventilation system. As he looked around, Marcus' eyes caught sight of Kira standing near an alcove by herself, her gaze darting nervously between him and the other furry workers who were whispering to one another. He made his way over to where she stood, noting how different things felt now compared to before his intervention. "Kira," Marcus called out gently but firmly, not wanting to startle her too much due to her sensitive nature as a young fairy child. She looked up at him with wide eyes full of gratitude and confusion. "Yes, Mr. Williams." He smiled warmly despite the exhaustion weighing down on his shoulders from the day's events. "You don't need to call me Mr. Kira," he said softly, extending an open hand towards her as if offering a silent comfort. She hesitated for just a moment before placing her small palm in his larger one and allowing him to guide her away from prying eyes of others who seemed less concerned about furry welfare than their own interests. The hall's artificial lighting cast long shadows on the polished metal floors, reflecting off shiny surfaces that gleamed under the bright lights. They walked towards a quieter corner where sunlight streamed in through large windows depicting distant stars and planets shining brightly against black void of space outside station's hulls. Kira seemed to relax somewhat once they found this more peaceful setting away from prying eyes or overhearing voices. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, crouching down so he was at eye level with Kira, gesture that made him feel smaller and less imposing in comparison to the towering structures around them. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I am now," Kira replied quietly but confidently, a look of newfound determination shining in her eyes as if something had shifted inside of her upon seeing Marcus stand up for what was right earlier today. Marcus sighed deeply, then leaned back against wall behind him, his arms crossed over his chest, but one still reaching out towards Kira, who stood close beside now. "I hope so too," he murmured thoughtfully before looking directly into those expressive eyes framed by delicate scales that shimmered under changing lights filtering through windows above them. "What's going to happen next?" she asked curiously, tilting her head slightly in contemplation, as if unsure but also hopeful about future changes coming their way based on actions taken today. Marcus paused for a moment before speaking carefully. "It's hard to say exactly what will come from this," he admitted honestly, without wanting to overpromise or dismiss valid concerns she had now after seeing real impact first and through direct action against injustice witnessed and fought earlier within stations halls filled with diverse beings representing many species across galaxies. "But we won't stop fighting until everyone gets treated fairly," Marcus continued determinedly, emphasizing his resolve by clenching fists tightly, as if he could will change to happen simply based on sheer force of will alone. "We'll keep pushing for better conditions and fair treatment for all, especially those who have been denied basic rights like food and respect." Kira's eyes widened in surprise at this declaration, before softening into grateful regard mixed with admiration. She reached forward, suddenly wrapping arms around Marcus's waist, without warning causing him to pause momentarily due to suddenness. But then he returned, hugged gently despite initial shock, patting her back soothingly. It was a rare moment for both of them. It had been years since the last time Ennio, not even his own daughter, had hugged him like this. The warmth from Kira's embrace felt oddly comforting and affirming, in contrast to previous events that seemed so raw and unsettling just hours ago, now receding into past tense as new beginnings began unfolding instead. As they pulled away, Marcus looked down at Kira with a soft smile on his face, reflecting sincerity of words spoken combined with physical affection shared between two beings from different worlds, coming together over common cause rooted deeply within sense of justice. No matter how challenging circumstances might appear initially daunting or overwhelming to overcome fully, yet still making positive strides towards lasting reforms benefiting many others besides themselves. "Remember," Marcus said solemnly, looking straight into Kira's eyes, "you matter. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong." Kira nodded vigorously, absorbing those words deeply, as if committing them firmly in her heart and mind for future reference should similar doubts ever creep back and again down road ahead. Still uncertain, but promising potential improvements nonetheless based on collective efforts made thus far. Just then Marcus' daughter, Lily, who had been observing proceedings quietly from distance, stepped forward, joining Hug too, with both arms wrapping around both of them, creating three-person embrace, now full circle among all present. Tears glistened in her eyes as she looked at father, who stood tall and strong despite challenges faced earlier today, while also reassuringly holding Kira close, showing compassion beyond race or species boundaries. Kira pulled back slightly, peering up into faces surrounding her, feeling warmth spread throughout body due to unexpected acts of kindness from humans present here, now more than just strangers, but allies too, an ongoing struggle against systemic inequalities imposed upon certain groups within galactic society as whole, not only limited to station itself, where events had transpired recently, culminating moment marking significant turning point. "Will you come back?" Kira asked quietly, after a few moments. "Look, Ing up at Marcus, with hopeful eyes full of trust that someone would continue fighting alongside her even when difficulties persisted or seemed insurmountable again in future battles yet unseen, but certainly brewing beneath surface tensions, still simmering below calm facade now temporarily restored order. Marcus chuckled softly, without bitterness, just understanding and determination mixed together, forming unique blend, reflecting strength needed to push forward towards brighter tomorrow. "Try and stop me," he replied with a firm nod, looking down at Kira, who smiled back up at him in genuine gratitude for this promise, made out of respect gained today between them, bridging gap, not only spatial distance separating worlds, but also emotional barriers erected over time due persistent discrimination or prejudice faced every day. One father, one lunch, one storm. Sometimes that's all it takes.